Last week was a historic week with both highs and lows. Here are the highlights of what happened. 1. In a first-time ever vote, 19 US senators voted to block weapons arms transfers to Israel in an effort led by Senator Bernie Sanders. 2. The International Criminal Court issued warrants of arrest for both current Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Israeli Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant. And 3. The US House of Representatives passed the Non-Profit Killer Bill, HR 9495. Now let's dig into each one of those. Number 1. History was made when 19 senators voted to stop arms transfers to Israel last week. In an effort led by Senator Bernie Sanders, 19 US senators, all Democrats, voted to block sales of US weapons to Israel. There are currently 51 Democrats that are serving in the US Senate, and 19 out of those 51 Democrats voted to block those weapon sales. That's effectively 37% of Senate Democrats, over a third of Senate Democrats. This split represents a significant contingent within the Democratic Party that is willing to break on unconditional support to Israel. This is significant and it is a very big deal. It's historic. It's the first time ever. Please send a thank you email to the senators who voted yes to block these weapon sales to Israel in this time of genocide. I can guarantee you that the senators who voted yes, these 19 Democratic senators, are facing a river of shit, probably from Democratic leadership and then outside lobbying forces as well. I've linked an automatic thank you email form from ADC National in my bio. Just click over to my bio and go ahead and send them the thank you emails. These senators need to know that we have their backs. So not only was this vote historic, this was the first time ever that the Senate has voted on stopping weapon sales to Israel. Ever. And the over a third of Democratic senators that broke with their party represents the significant change that is currently underway within the Democratic Party. And it's critical to note that while only 19%, 19 senators out of 100 senators of the US Senate voted yes to block these arms transfers, polls have found that more than 60% of Americans, regardless of party, whether they're Democrat, Republican, Independent, or whatever, 60% of Americans want to halt the flow of weapons shipments into Israel from the United States. The political establishment within the United States is very out of touch with most Americans. For this historic vote, a coalition of organizations came together in grassroots support for Sanders' effort to block the weapon shipments to Israel. That includes TRUA, which is a coalition of Jewish rabbis, Jewish Voice for Peace, CARE, the Council on Islamic Relations, J Street, labor unions including SEIU, and many other organizations. And of course, AIPAC and the Israel Lobby were in opposition of this effort. And speaking of out of touch, the Biden-Harris White House attempted to undermine the Democratic senators voting yes in support of this legislation to block weapon sales to Israel by circulating talking points that said that the elected officials who were going to vote yes on this effort led by Senator Sanders were helping Hamas. It's important to note that what's happening in Gaza right now is a genocide. Multiple genocide scholars have confirmed that as a fact. Israel is currently under investigation for genocide at the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, in a court case led by South Africa and 14 other countries. Number 2, history was made when the ICC, the International Criminal Court, issued arrest warrants for current Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Israeli Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant. The ICC issued these warrants on November 21st after finding reasonable grounds for war crimes, which include murder, persecution, and other inhumane acts in Gaza. There are now more than 100 countries who are now legally obligated to arrest both Netanyahu and Gallant if they step foot in those countries. And leaders of multiple countries, including Canada, including Italy, have already said that if Netanyahu comes to their countries, they will arrest him. Within the United States, the mayor of Dearborn, Michigan, Abdullah Hamid already said that if Netanyahu came within the city districts of Dearborn, he would have him arrested. Multiple progressive Democrats applauded the issuance of these warrants, including members of the Squad, Cori Bush, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and of course the AIPAC crowd of mostly GOP sycophants, but inclusive of some Democrats, issued statements undermining the ICC, which is the same thing that the Biden-Harris White House did. The White House issued a statement that it fundamentally rejects the ICC's warrants and threatens sanctions against the court, undermining international law. I hope to see both Netanyahu and Gallant face justice and their day in court at The Hague. In some very bad news from last week, the nonprofit killer bill HR 9495 passed the US House of Representatives. I wrote about this bill last week and I also made a YouTube video about it. If you want more context on the bill, please go check out that video and go check out my Substack as well. Now that the bill has passed the House, it will head to the Senate, and there will be a full court effort on behalf of grassroots organizations, nonprofits, and the coalition of supporting civil society that supports those nonprofits that's going to fight this in the Senate. But looking ahead to when Trump is actually sworn in as president in January, both the US House and the Senate are going to be under GOP control. And it's almost guaranteed that even if this nonprofit killer bill is killed in the US Senate now, that it will pass sometime in the future and be signed into law by President Trump. This law is going to have chilling effects for civil society and the nonprofits in the United States. And this effort is being spearheaded to specifically attack those organizations that are advocating for Palestinian human rights in this time of genocide. All right, that's the update for this week. If you like this video, subscribe to my channel. And I also send out a weekly newsletter, so click over to the link in bio and to the Nadia Rahman Substack and subscribe to that for more analysis of US politics from a Swana, Southwest Asian, and North African perspective.